All right. So why am I even bringing this up? So this might be really hard for everybody to hear, but I was reading Massively OP, and they have a long running article series where they go and they play. They let players determine, or the readers determine which game that the series will cover, and then the person writing the article would have to go into the game and experience the game and then write about it. And then every single article they would create almost like a choose your own adventure, where they would put up a vote and say, what do you want me to do in this game next? And then the player or the reader would decide what they want to do. So they recently did this with Wurm, and I did not realize they were doing this. And I was reading the article, and at first it made me not happy. And then it made me, I took a step back and tried to deduce, okay, well, why didn't it make me happy? Well, was I really expecting anything different? Is there anything in this article that we could use to determine certain things about our game? Because there's some players in this game that think that if only we had this, or if only we had a new this or that, then players would like this game. And when I'm going to read this article, and you're going to realize that's not really true. And so what I'd want to do with this experiment is read this article to you guys, and then what we're trying to do is to determine what exactly, whether we can separate actual criticisms of this game that could be useful versus things that just, like, this player just doesn't like this game at all. And so if you don't like hearing bad things about Wurm, or if you got a light heart, you might want to turn away for the next 5 minutes or so. But let me read this for you guys. So he starts off and he says, I have a feeling that this is going to be a short article and a probably completely inept series, because Wurm Online is definitely not the kind of game that one gets deep into for just a month. So they run this article over a month time. I believe he releases something every single week. And that's not to suggest that the game, that it seems deep right now, so much as the surface scratching is less than an epidermis and more like a shale. It's been a long, long while since I've been in an MMORPG where the most basic of functions were not immediately clear. But back then, that was because people didn't really have to have a handle on things like refinement or even what systems were best. It's why we had games where you had to hail NPCs, and why combat was mostly driven through a series of menu selections. Wait. Is combat not... Like these days in an MMORPG, do you do combat in a way where you're not using your mouse or keyboard? Like, no, that is not driven through a series of clicks and like button presses.
Usually,
now he did say
menu selections. It's not. He did say
menu selections. So what do you mean by usually it's not menu selections?
Like usually it's action bars.
The action bar is a menu.
Right. But like pressing 1, 2, 3 to select your actions.
This is something that I don't understand, because clicking 1, 2, and 3 is not fun sounding. But we do it all the time, and this is what games are. And so
I mean, we discussed what Wurm needs
I'm only
to do
on the
with
second.
combat
I'm only
okay.
on the
Yeah,
second
keep going.
paragraph.
Keep going.
So yeah,
keep going.
we're gonna keep going through this guy. Okay, to the game's credit, the tutorial does get one's feet wet. Well, you're handed the wild swath of basic tools you'll need, given a whole bunch of equipment, and provided some basic instructions on how to use those tools. After that, it was basically off to the new PvE server to just wander, and wonder, and try to get my head around things. So this paragraph's not too bad. So he's basically saying he liked the new tutorial. Great. And as we know, the new tutorial is essentially, here's how you dig, here's how you chop down a tree, here's how you mine, here's how you fight. Go into the game. So far, so good. So he's saying he went through the tutorial, so now he knows how to dig, how to chop down a tree, how to mine, and how to fight. Because that's what he should have learned in the tutorial. And he's proving that with that paragraph. All right, so let's see what else he has to say. So most of the primary complaints here stem from the use of equipment. And when he says equipment, he actually means items, not equipment. Not only do you have to actually equip a tool, which we all know you don't, but you also have to activate it by double-clicking on the tool in your inventory, in what I can only assume is a throwback to ye olden days of when MMORPG developers weren't really sure of how to refine this sort of thing. It admittedly took me a while to recall that. Not sure what he's saying here. And it was only recalled because he went to the Wurmpedia, which, by the way, has links to pretty much every single item to the game. Every single thing that is laid out in the game's world. I'm pretty sure there's Wurmpedia entries for empty wagons that just sit around town. So he's making fun of the starter towns and everybody making their own carts, I'm assuming, and not wagons. So this paragraph for, I guess players, this one's a little bit more hard to swallow because he's relaying some misinformation about how the game is actually played by saying that you first have to equip a tool and then you have to activate a tool to use it.
But you have to look at this as this is his honest
now
view
this
of
is
the
his
game,
honest
right?
opinion, right? So he believes, based on the way that he played it, that you have to equip a tool and then activate a tool to use it,
which is telling of the confusing nature of the way that things are done in this game.
Yeah, so we know that it's different. This game is different. It's different in the mechanics. It's different in the way that you perform really any action just by the sheer force. I'm surprised he didn't mention that you have to left click to look around and then right click to interact with the game.
Yeah,
because that's different than every other game. But yeah, it shows that there is some confusion on his part. All right, so next paragraph. So once I found out through the instructions that weren't immediately in the game, I started to work out how to chop down a tree, break it down into further logs, and then refine those logs into a bunch of materials. Now this sentence I don't understand at all, because he had just said that he liked the tutorial and the tutorial was good for him to learn a little bit of the game, and we just deduced the fact that in the tutorial you learn how to chop down a tree. So then why a paragraph later is he talking about that he had to go out of the game to learn how to chop down a tree? Not sure. So maybe he didn't really go through the tutorial and he was, I don't know, he did something else, or he went through the tutorial, missed the tree section, and then tried later to determine how to chop down a tree. I'm not sure, but it's a little confusing for me. So then then later he ultimately saw that his character was getting encumbered more than she actually was. And it says, yes, from the very off, my starting character is already bearing the load of too much to hold for her to bear the mere dint of wearing armor. Another possible throwback that makes about as much logical sense as coin weight does. I'm not really sure. I believe what this person's trying to say is that they chopped down a tree, they put logs in their inventory, put armor on, and then wondered why they weren't moving. And then said, deduced in the end of the fact that this doesn't make logical sense to them. Why can't I move? Just because of this. I picked up some newbie logs. I should be able to walk forever. So this almost paragraph to me made it feel like, okay, this is not a player that enjoys this type of game. Yeah, and like that's what it comes down. Like, this was somebody that's never played a survival type of game of any kind and doesn't understand it. Which is okay. If they don't understand it, let's see if there is anything that they actually say that we could use as constructive criticism towards this game. So then
player.
So then, of course, there was the fact that the Wurmpedia seems to be the primary guiding hand for the game. Stubbornly, I've been ignoring it to this point. But I get the feeling I'm only hamstringing myself by doing so. The thing is, though, that if you need like a guide outside of the game in order to figure out how to play the game, you might want to consider going back to the drawing board, is what he said. I don't agree with that at all.
Right.
Has anybody ever played a game and has never watched a video or read anything about that game you were playing that you enjoyed ever?
To go learn something.
Something about the game. And what instead I find, the argument is, this is the argument that I think that a lot of us fall victim of, right? The games that we don't like, when we're playing it, we always use the excuse of, oh man, I don't know what to do, and they need to tell me what to do in the game. Like in the MMO RPG.
So what you're suggesting is that he's not liking it for other reasons, and he's making up things that are like annoying.
No, it's like
to say why he doesn't like it.
When you're playing a game and you don't like it, you start making up excuses that are not really
precise
the reason why you're not enjoying it. And one of them that I think a lot of us use, and he's falling victim of it here, is the excuse that I should be able to know everything about a game while I play it. And if I had to go outside of the game, then the game developers have done it wrong.
Right. And maybe like, Call of Duty's like that. But I would even say WoW and any other MMO, you will find people are often going outside of the game.
Every game. I remember you talking about going in World of Warcraft and watching videos and reading strategies and doing all this stuff outside the game to get better, to be able to play this game.
Right. And I think that somebody, who was it that said at the beginning?
So I could have used that same argument in World of Warcraft if I didn't like that game. I could have.
Typical was saying like, and this is the reason why it's different in Wurm compared to World of Warcraft. In World of Warcraft, you're only going to start doing these things near the end of the game when things start getting like really difficult. Whereas in Wurm, the most difficult part of the game is right at the beginning, and that's when you're going to need to look up most of your guides and things like that.
Right. Every game we had some sort of offline resource that we use somewhere. Yeah. And because we liked the game, there was never a comment that we would say, oh, it's not in the game, so why are we using it? We're only using
Right.
the stuff in the game. You only ever say that. And I think we're all somewhat victim of this, or like have done this before, is blame a game for not having everything in the game for only the games that we don't like.
Right.
We use it as an excuse. And it's kind of hard when they're using it as an excuse in an article that's supposed to be professional.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Okay, keep going.
so these complaints are on top of a number of small and just generally weird design decisions that only serve to exacerbate an already overall strange experience for me. So there's a good sentence where Wurm is like a survival game, like Wurm is a very strange for him. So already, he's used to a very specific WoW type formula, and this doesn't provide it. And he's having a hard time accepting it. So then he goes, here's another one. You can't jump. That's the whole sentence, by the way. You can't jump.
You can't jump. Yeah.
And then he says, and apparently you don't need to. If you want your compass to work, you'll have to stand still for 15 seconds before it orients itself. And then he says, by the way, that's not how compasses work. You don't click on trees. Here's a great sentence. You don't click on trees to harvest them so much as you click on the tile of ground of a tree it's sitting on in order to interact with it. So I think this is the first constructive criticism here, this sentence. Because even though we are used to it and we click on the ground, every single player that plays this game, if you watch any newbie let's play of this game, the first thing they try to do is click on the tree. So I wonder if they could just do that, if like the devs could figure out a way so that the tree is clickable. Maybe the tree and the ground is like highlighted when you click on it, or maybe it's just the tree. The stump, for example, becomes clickable after you chop down a tree.
I think they just need to make it so that the tree and the tile together are one item. I don't know how hard that is to do.
It could be something like that. But that's true that most players have a hard time with that at the start. And maybe that's something that they could do. I mean, it won't save this player, but
it's definitely a remnant of the past of how this game was coded in the first place.
Yeah. So at this point, what we're trying to do is just separate some sort of constructive criticism that would help the game in the long run.
Hey, Mr. Laggy.
And hey, Mr. Laggy, we're about 70% through an article. There's only 2 more paragraphs. So yeah, we're 70% through this article, guys. All right. So the last
first valid criticism,
sort of constructive criticism here. And then it goes, okay, but then I might not be the Wurm Online's target audience. They finally realizes or is stating that he should have stated that at the beginning, I would say.
I know.
It's obviously doing something right enough that a bunch of people have been flocking this game since its Steam launch, and perhaps I just need to slow down and take things piece by piece, which is frustrating to me, but if that's the way this game is meant to be played, then I suppose so be it. I'm going to stubbornly stick it out on this PvE world I've stumbled into. But I guess the only poll option I can come up with is whether to blatantly disregard the Wurmpedia and figure things out on my own, or sit put and read up on it first. On the one hand, reading up would certainly be a smart thing to do, but on the other hand, I did feel like sorting things out, like how to break down wood and into construction materials by myself, is part of the discovery. I love how his example is something that you learn in the tutorial of what he learned in the Wurmpedia, which is just odd. So then he's asking the people reading this article of whether his choices are read up on Wurmpedia or ignore Wurmpedia completely and just play the game, which is the weirdest choices to me that he could come up with, because he's basically saying, I don't know what the heck I'm doing here. I don't understand this type of game. So the choice here is a choice that no one should ever have to make. Why is it one or the other? Why isn't there a choice? Right. Play the game, and when you find something wrong or that you need to learn, read up on it on Wurmpedia. Why does he have to read up on Wurmpedia before he plays any of the game? That wouldn't make sense either. And it just shows that he's fallen into that trap of learn the entire game on Wurmpedia and then I'll play it. Like, who plays that way? Why is that an option in this article? But yes, the mechanics itself, who wants to die? So you're a fairly new player too, aren't you? So the mechanics are not intuitive. They're not. In the sense that they're not that they're not intuitive, but they are not the standard MMO templated controls.
Did we finish reading the article?
I did. That was the end of the article.
Okay, that was the end of the article.
So what do you think? I'm
curious to know what the next one is going to be like.
So what do you think they chose? So he presented this vote, which is just the dumbest vote ever. Either he's going to be in the game and not look up anything on Wurmpedia, or he's going to look up Wurmpedia, do all this research about the game ahead of time, and then he's going to play the game.
Did he make a decision, or did the
voting's done? The voting's done.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my guess is that it was to read up on the Wurmpedia.
You would be right.
I'm glad, because I don't know if I could read the next one if he didn't. Oh, and I'm crashing again, man. So
here's a lot of people commented. You can read the comments. You find these days that Wurmpedia or Massively OP has an audience that is not very big on survival games and that sort of thing. They're very big on the traditional MMO combat formula of EverQuest and World of Warcraft. So they're very big on those types of games, and they don't really like to cover anymore the other types of games, really. And their audience really showcases that. And there's one comment that kind of showcases all of our biases over games when we don't like them. And so this is the comment that the guy said, I voted for self-discovery for the simple fact that if you have to read a wiki for gameplay, then that's terrible game design. So you should try to play the game as it is and only search the wiki for things you otherwise would in any other game, right? That should have been the option in the vote. Play the game and then search the wiki when you need help. Like, that's basically what the guy's saying. Like, why isn't that an option?
Right.
That's how this game's built. He even mentioned it, that the game has a wiki button that you can use to read the game. I wonder if he would feel better, or if a criticism could potentially be that the wiki should be within the game itself. Like, they should have some sort of template of you being able to read, which actually used to have, like, we used to have that. We used to have the in-game wiki, and it was terrible, but it was there at least.
Yeah. Who wants to die wants to see this guy play chess for the first time.
Well, why are we doing all this again?
The strategies. Okay, so hold on. You see this corner here? This corner here?
Yeah, can you imagine this guy playing any board game ever? I wanted to read that article. It was interesting to see how people react to a game like Wurm Online and then publicize it, because a lot of us might be under the impression that if only we just change such and such or this or that, more players would come in. If only we had a better combat system is a common one. Just include a common combat system, we'd have players come into this game and not think that this game is like this article. And the truth of the matter is, this game is just a niche game. There's players that will not ever understand it, like this guy. And the majority of players are like this guy, unfortunately.
Right. Unfortunately.
And then there's all of us. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to find more players like us. And if a new combat system will help us find more players like us, then fine. That they should work on it. But I would argue that they shouldn't really be working at the moment on trying to appease players that are not in this game anymore. They should be trying to flesh out this game for the players that are in it right now, so that we have an overall better game, so that when a player does come into the game and enjoys it like we do, they now get the benefit of a more in-depth Wurm Online.